Death at Rottingdean. Chapter 12. You may be certain that the Black Horse was a meeting place for the village smugglers, who must often have come together in secret in its small tap room and discussed their plans. It was a dangerous game the villagers were playing, for not everyone was in it. Enemies of Rottingdean acted as informers and watched when contraband was being hidden in cottages, stables, the churchyard, tucked away in the machinery inside the mill, or in the furze bushes in Saltdean Vale. These informers were called 10-shilling men, which is what they were paid for their services. They, too, played a dangerous game, for like all spies, they could expect no mercy when they were caught. Henry Blythe, Smuggler's Village, The Story of Rottingdean. Harry Totwell had called a meeting in the small back room of the Black Horse for 8 o'clock on Monday night to discuss what should be done in the event, the likely event it seemed now, of an official inquiry into the unfortunate death of the young Coast Guard. Official, in this instant, meant an investigation conducted by someone other than the tractable Fat Jack Woodhouse, the Queen's coroner, for instance, Dr. Paul Barriston, or the Chief Constable Sir Robert Pinkney. Both were from Brighton, and both had reputations of persistently sniffing out information. And neither would be nearly so obliging as the complicitous Fat Jack, who was nervous as a compass needle about the possibility that outsiders might come poking their noses into Rottingdean business. Harry knew all about Fat Jack's feelings on the matter, because the constable had been on his doorstep not 30 minutes after the Coast Guard's body was hauled onto the beach, inquiring apprehensively about what was best to be done. "What's best?" Harry had answered somewhat hollowly. He recovered himself and, in stouter voice, replied, "Well, I'll tell you, Jack. What's best is to put it about that the fellow threw himself off the cliff in a fit of despair, and the corpse went out with the tide." God knows it could be true. Harry himself had felt many black moments after his wife abandoned him for a baker and a brick house in Lewes 3 years before, and the cliffs had seemed to offer a certain remedy. Every year the coroner was called down twice or thrice to inquire into the deaths of men and women who found huddled at the foot of the cliffs, or washed up on the beach with the bleak and invariable ruling of death by suicide. Several such were buried along the northern perimeter of the church graveyard up against the stone fence of Farmer Hartlethorpe's muckyard. One stone was marked with only a woman's name and the bleak word oblivion. But Fat Jack, scratching his head, screwing up his fleshy mouth, was not reassured by Harry's suggestion. "He was stabbed too, Harry, right through the front to the back." He paused and added mournfully, "Drowned and stabbed. Somebody did him, Harry, with his own knife." Stabbing made it more difficult, but not impossible. "Well then," Harry said shortly, "put it about that he tumbled onto his knife on the way down." "Well, yes," Fat Jack said slowly. He blinked, his small eyes pig-like in his pink moony face, and his moustache worked back and forth. "I suppose that'll answer. But who you think really did him, Harry?" Harry frowned, suspecting that Fat Jack suspected him. After all, if Radford had been sniffing too close, Harry was the one most likely to know it and to take prompt action against the intruder. But whether Harry did it or not, he would never have admitted it to Fat Jack, who could not be trusted with such a dangerous piece of information. "One of the men, I suppose," he said with a shrug, fearing that Radford had turned up something on him. Fat Jack closed one eye thoughtfully. "Trunky, maybe?" "Could have been Trunky," Harry agreed with alacrity. "Where's the corpse?" "Laid out in the guard room at the Coast Guard station on the High Street. Foxy Smith said to take it there and he'd look out for it." Of course, Captain Reynolds Smith of the Rottingdean Coast Guard station had not been granted his nickname without earning it. He looked out for everything. "Have you telegraphed Brighton yet?" he asked. Fat Jack shook his head. "Foxy thought I should talk to you first," he muttered. "Well, do it," Harry snapped. He was irritated because Fat Jack should have been able to think of these things for himself without being told. And if he could not, if he had to be primed and drilled with a ready answer to every conceivable question, how would he reply to Barriston when it came to the inquest? This latter question concerned Harry deeply, but he could not linger over it just now. There were more pressing matters to attend to, such as the plan that must be hammered out at tonight's meeting at the Black Horse. As the nature to this plan, Harry had a firm opinion, and since he was the acknowledged leader of this organization, his official position was that of the lander, who was assigned to organize the transportation and arrange for the security of the merchandise once it reached the beach. He was confident that he would have no difficulty persuading his fellow free traders to subscribe to it. Clearly, they should lay off the work until the inquest was over and the investigation had come to an end. Like it or not, Wednesday's night shipment would have to be postponed. Temporarily suspended, as he put it in his argument to the group that night, until the next dark of the moon. Then it will be safe to get on with our business. He had turned to the barman with an ingratiating grin. "Perry, my fine man, go out the bar and fix us up with another pint all round, will you? We'll drink to our health in the next shipment as soon as 'tis safe." But Perry, the owner of the Black Horse and one of their number, was not to be so glibly patronized. "Temporarily suspended," he exclaimed. He took a bottle from the table and brandished it angrily. "That is the very last bottle of brandy, and not another drop in the cellar. I was counting on 2 tons from Wednesday's shipment. Harry, I don't intend to wait, the Coast Guard or no Coast Guard." Mrs. Howard was eagerly contentious. She shook her gloved forefinger in Harry's face and shrilled. "And I am depending on the cambric and eyelid lace, Mr. Tutwell. How am I to finish Mrs. Strumpshaw's trousseau without it, I'd like you to tell me. The girl is to be married a fortnight hence, and I have not begun the petticoats. To wait until the next dark of the moon is impossible, and the expense of purchasing the materials from London would simply be ruinous." Harry was attempting to formulate a reassuring response to Mrs. Howard when Curly Napton, the proprietor of the village's only tobacco shop, loomed over him. Curly was the size of a bear and one of the best cakemen Harry had ever known, capable of carrying 2 tons, each weighing about 45 pounds, one on his chest and the other on his back while climbing a cliffside ladder. "What about me baccy?" Curly grunted, glowering at Harry. "I didn't get all that was coming to me in the last shipment because a bale of it went to Hove and to Burke, that scaly rascal. I'm telling you, Harry, I need it now. I'm as sorry as the next bout young Radford. God love his soul. But I says we get on with the game." Curly spit out the last word empathetically, and a man in a crushed green felt hat, who drove one of the wagons that was used to haul goods from Brighton and Lewes, picked them up and hammered them home. "Right, Harry, on with the game. I've got a wife and babes waiting on me hauling pay. What's the matter? You think Fat Jack's going to blab on us? On with the game, I says. On with the game." There was a loud applause, more shouts of "on with the game," and a round of sarcastic sniggers at the mention of Fat Jack. "Fat Jack's a 10-shilling man? Not bloody likely," muttered Curly, and Perry Styles agreed. "Not if he knows what's good for him," he growled in a surly tone. He looked around. "Where's Trunky Thomas? I want to hear how Trunky feels about suspending Wednesday's shipment." "Trunky will land it," said a short, sallow-faced man with his hair parted in the middle. He was Grantley the grocer, recently elected to the parish council, and therefore a man whose opinions might be thought to count for something. "Trunk is a brave man, not one to dodge a risk. And I'm with the rest of you. I got a big order coming with the next lot." He cast a meaningful look at Harry and added judiciously, "Mayhap we should vote Trunky to be our leader, since Harry's feeling gingerly." There was a mutter of agreement among the crowd, and Mrs. Hicks, the laundress, a close friend of Fat Jack, raised her voice. "You have said a true thing there, Gabriel Grantley. Trunky Thomas would be glad enough to bring the ship in Wednesday night, investigation or no." "And don't forget Captain Smith," Mrs. Hicks' sister, Iris Portney, chimed in. "The captain is here to take care of us and help us get the job done." "That's right, Iris," Mrs. Hicks agreed. "Captain Smith won't let an investigation get in the way." She looked around. "Where the devil is Trunky?" she demanded. "And the captain, too. Somebody fetch both of them and let us vote." Harry himself had been looking forward to the arrival of Foxy Smith, whom he had tried several times that day to contact. Foxy usually made it a point to show his face at these meetings, if only to remind the villagers that they owed their present influence and their future prosperity to him. Harry was confident that he would agree as to the need for caution and delay. Foxy was in close and frequent contact with investors and understood the larger situation in the way the villagers could not. But Harry was not at all pleased to hear the group calling for Trunky Thomas. Trunky was an out-and-out troublemaker in Harry's opinion, and would not be above the exploiting of the group's unhappiness to wrest its leadership from him. In fact, Harry had known for some time that Trunky had designs on his position of leadership and would try almost anything to take control of the operation. Not to put a too fine point on it, Harry didn't trust Trunky as far as he could heave a ton of brandy. If he had his own way, Trunky would have been out of the game altogether. But the choice had not been left to him, for the investors insisted that every important citizen of the village be included, with the exception, of course, the knobs who lived around the green and came and went as the whim struck them, the Burne-Joneses, the Richdales, and the new residents of the Elms. But while Harry chafed at this stipulation, he certainly saw the wisdom in it. Exclusion led to disaffection, and the disaffected men could easily become informers. And these days, informers with the right sort of intelligence to sell could earn a great deal more than just 10 shillings. Harry jumped up on the bench and raised his voice, striving to regain control of the unruly crew. "You got to think straight about this," he cried. "What happens if Trunky lights the ship on our inn in Wednesday night and Chief Constable from Brighton is waiting with the Brighton police? What happens if there's a pitched battle and some of you don't return home?" That got the attention, and the room quieted somewhat. They all remembered the bloody stories of fierce fights between smugglers and the Crown's preventative forces, less than a century before. He lowered his voice. "It's a Coast Guard who died," he said, lowly and with emphasis. "Not some poor drunken sod who happened to stumble off a cliff in the night." He looked around the group, challenging one pair of eyes after the other. "There's no doubt about it. Somebody did young Radford, and the Crown's going to want to know who. The Crown is going to want satisfaction." That reduced the objections to mutterings, at least momentarily, and gave Harry time to consider his strategies. It was a sticky wicket, to be sure. Trunky was threatening on the one hand, and the coroner and the chief constable on the other, and there was the inquest into Radford's death to be got through. But equally important and equally difficult to know how to handle were the investors, the men who had put up the capital to purchase the merchandise from the French suppliers and pay the villagers of Rottingdean to smuggle it into the country. The romance of smuggling had died several generations ago, and with it the knowledge of how most smuggling operations worked. But central to all of them, Harry knew, had been the need for money to purchase the imported goods. That meant somebody, often a consortium of wealthy merchants, would advance the funds. A London draper, for example, might stock his shop with smuggled silk and gloves, or a publican would readily pay good value for a constant supply of duty-free wine and spirits. Harry did not know the identity of the current investors, but he suspected that they were just such wealthy merchants concerned that a change in excise laws might make it difficult for them to obtain their goods and anxious to establish an alternate trade route, as it were, another way to move their merchandise into the country in the event that they were not able to use accustomed avenues. In fact, the investors had made it very clear, according to Foxy Smith, that this was not a short-term arrangement. They had invested several villages along the south-east coast before they determined on Rottingdean, choosing the village because of its superior beach, its already established tunnels, and its proximity to London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, just a few miles off the former road. They wanted to establish a regular, reliable organization that they could count on for long term, and were willing to invest sufficiently so that the whole village would profit in the end. They had paid very well for the improvement of the old system of tunnels, including the addition of 3 new tunnels to the cliffside and the excavation of a huge underground storage depot far larger than was presently required. Indeed, in Harry's opinion, the tunneling project was substantially overbuilt, and he had told Foxy that he couldn't imagine bringing in enough merchandise to fill even half of the new capacity. But Foxy had just grinned and shrugged his narrow shoulders in his usual sardonic fashion, which led Harry to suspect that the investors had financed the tunneling operations out of a different motive, that they intended to put as much money into as many pockets as possible, thereby purchasing the villagers' cooperation and ensuring Rottingdean's eagerness to continue the business arrangement in good times as well as in bad. Well, if that was the investors' hidden motive, Harry thought sourly, they had certainly achieved it. The honest folk who for years had been accustomed to live frugally on the weak shillings brought in by family breadwinners had immediately begun to savour their new influence. They were spending every halfpenny of the increased income on gowns and coats and horses and gigs, repairing their old cottages and building new ones, expanding old businesses and investing into new ones, such as Mrs. Howard's dress shop and Curly Napton's tobacconist's shop, which depended on the very goods they were bringing in. Now they were willing to risk the enterprise, their investments, and perhaps even their lives to keep the merchandise and money flowing, which did not seem to Harry like a very sound plan. Harry frowned. Where was Foxy Smith? He was the only one who could tell him how the investor had reacted to the news that a local coast guard had died in suspicious circumstances. He was the only one who could endorse Harry's plan to postpone Wednesday night's landing without Foxy. There was a thump-thump in the taproom front. The double doors flew open and Trunky Thomas burst through. His right leg was shorter than his left and stiff, so that he walked with a peculiar rolling motion like an old salt home from the sea. His jowled face was flushed with exertion, his cap half off, his knit jerkin hanging open. "Well, it's about time, Trunky," Mrs. Hicks cried cordially. "We've been talking about you and wondering why you weren't here. Come in and have a drink." "Yes, Trunky," Gabriel Grantley said, pouring a mug of ale for the new arrival. "Where's Foxy?" Trunky rocked to a halt. "Where's Foxy?" he repeated in a gruff, grim voice. He ignored the mug Gabriel Grantley was holding out to him and waited until the whole room was quiet and all eyes were thus upon him. "Where's Foxy? I'll tell you where he is. He's in the old mill, and he's dead, that's how he is. Dead as a door knocker." "Dead?" Mrs. Hicks cried open-mouthed. "Dead?" Gabriel Grantley gasped, staring at Trunky. The mug of ale dropped from his grasp and splashed over his new black trousers. He didn't seem to notice. "Dead," Harry whispered. His heart was pounding, his breath coming fast. Without Foxy, he could not contact the investors. Without Foxy, he was like a ship adrift in a fog, unsure of its heading, unclear of its destination. Without Foxy— "Aye, dead," Trunky said. "Shot through the chest, he were." He turned to glare at Harry. "And I got a pretty fair idea who done it."